welcome everyone to the CDT seminar this afternoon. So this is a slight departure for us, and we're going to be talking not necessarily about a scientific topic today, but something more about exploiting your technologies. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce one of my former PhD students, Russell Woolley, who went off and trained as a patent lawyer and has very kindly volunteered to come back virtually to the college and give us a presentation to the CDT. So Russell's talk today is an introduction to patent law, and I'm going to hand straight over to Russell. Thank you very much for doing this, Russell, and I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for everyone who's signed in today. I thought I'd start by giving the reason for this talk. So I did my PhD at Imperial, and at the time I didn't know anything at all about patents, which I think is normal for a PhD student. I did cite one patent in my thesis, and although I'd read it, none of it made any sense to me. And looking back, there were some basic concepts of patent law which it would have been useful to know at the time. So I got in touch with my old supervisor, Professor Skinner, and I offered to give this talk to you, the next generation, if you will, to give you some basic information on patents. And in my work, I'm seeing that universities are being encouraged to pay more and more attention to monetizing their research, and that normally requires patents. So hopefully this will be useful for your future careers. Briefly, my background: undergraduate chemistry, PhD at Imperial, which I finished in 2013. And then straight away I started working at Cartmels and Ransford. And we are a private law firm specializing in intellectual property, one of the oldest and largest such firms in the UK and in Europe for that matter. And I became fully qualified as a patent attorney about 3.5 years later. This is a fairly normal career path: a science degree, optional PhD, and then straight into the profession. As an outline, I'll be covering 1 what and 3 hows. What is a patent, where I'll explain the legal effect of a patent and what you can do with one. How to get a patent, where I'll explain what an invention needs to be granted as a patent. How to read a patent, where I'll explain the different parts making up a patent document and what you as researchers can focus on and what you can get out of patents. I'll then move on to how to be a patent attorney, where I'll give a few thoughts on my career and some advice. And then there should be time at the end for a Q&A. So, what is a patent? The first thing to say is what a patent is not. A patent does not give you any right to do anything. If you have invented something, a patent does not give you the right to use your invention. What a patent does is give you the right to stop someone else from using your invention. So it gives you a monopoly on your invention. And what can you do with that monopoly? Well, of course, you could keep everyone else off the market. So people have to buy from you if they want to use your invention. Another thing you can do is license. So if you're a small company, a university spin-out that doesn't have enough manufacturing capacity to supply the market with enough of your invention, you could work with a larger company that does. You can license that company, and they should be willing to pay you a royalty for the right to be selling your invention. Another thing that patents are good for is that they are an item of property. They can be bought and sold. Patents are assets. So even if you're not actively using the patent, having a portfolio of patents is a way of showing value. And this can be really important if you're a university spin-out looking to be bought by the big guys, by a large company. Without any patents, that larger company may well think they could just reverse engineer your invention and copy it, and you won't get anything. So let's think a bit more about what this patent right means in practice, the actual effect of being able to stop someone else from working your invention. Let's imagine that patents existed thousands of years ago, and suppose the first caveman to invent the wheel got a patent protecting the wheel. And this means that this first caveman can stop anyone else from selling a wheel. And let's imagine a few years later, a second caveman comes along and improves the wheel. They invent a wheel with spokes, which is a lighter, more efficient wheel. And that second caveman gets a patent protecting a spoked wheel. But even though that second caveman has a patent protecting its spoked wheel, it can't sell that spoked wheel without the permission of the first caveman. This is because the first caveman's patent protects all wheels, including the spoked wheel, which was invented later. So the second caveman can't sell a wheel without the permission of the first caveman. And the first caveman can't sell a spoked wheel without the permission of the second caveman, because the second caveman has a patent limited to protecting a spoked wheel. So we know what a patent is, but how do you get a patent? And first of all, to get a patent, you need an invention. I think everyone would understand that. But what is an invention? It's not just something that's clever and new. Patent law requires an invention to be something technical, something tangible. The law lists a number of things that are not deemed to be inventions that you can't get a patent for. And these include more abstract concepts like theories or business methods. So if you've come up with some foolproof cryptocurrency investment strategy, don't expect to protect that by a patent. And there are also a number of things that would normally be deemed to be technical enough to be patentable inventions. But patent law has decided that you can't get a patent for. And this is for public policy reasons. So in Europe, for example, you can't get a patent for a method of treatment. The reason being that we don't want doctors or surgeons to worry about patent infringement when they're trying to save someone's life. You also can't get a patent in Europe for an anti-personnel landmine. Patents are intended to encourage innovation, and the decision was taken that we don't want patent law to encourage new and improved landmines. So let's think a bit more about what this means. If someone was asked to name a famous inventor of antiquity, then Archimedes would be a common choice. He famously got in a full bath, splashed water everywhere, and realized that this was because he had displaced a volume of water equal to the volume of his body. And as clever as this discovery might have been, the discovery itself is not patentable. This discovery of what we now call the Archimedes principle merely revealed the reasons why something which had always been happening was happening. That's not deemed to be technical. You might be able to get a patent for an invention which applies that discovery to do something technical, but you can't patent the discovery itself. And so something that is technical enough to be patentable is the Archimedes screw, this ancient pump whereby rotating the handle you can pump water from low to high, supposedly used to irrigate the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Once you have an invention, to be granted a patent, there are a number of requirements. Your invention must be novel, inventive, and industrially applicable. Novel means that the invention has not been done before. Inventive means that the invention is not obvious. Industrially applicable means that the invention is useful. And a further requirement is that the patent must teach how to repeat the invention. And over the next few slides, I'm going to go through these requirements. First of all, novelty. If your invention has been done before, then it cannot be patented. What this means in practice is that if the invention was available to the public before you filed your patent application, then that patent cannot be granted. So the key date isn't when you first thought of the invention. It isn't when you first wrote down the invention in your lab book. The key date is when you have filed a patent application. If the invention was known to the public before the application was filed, you can't get a patent. So the key point here is don't wait too long. If you think you've invented something, don't wait for 2 years before finally getting round to discussing with a patent attorney. Someone could come up with the same invention later than you, but if they publish it before you filed a patent application, you will not be able to get a patent because the invention is said to lack novelty. Another key point is that an invention being available to the public covers any way that the public could have gained the knowledge of your invention. It doesn't have to be widely known. It just has to be possible that someone could have seen it without breaking a confidentiality agreement. So if your invention is mentioned in a journal article or in your PhD thesis, before you file a patent application, you cannot get a patent. Even if no one's actually read your PhD thesis, which is very likely to be the case. I'm sure no one's read mine since I passed my Viva. As long as someone could have read your PhD thesis, which they could have done because they're open access these days, if they could have read it, then that's enough. And another illustration of what it means to be publicly available is given in this cartoon here. If you're giving a talk at a conference that is open to the public, even if it is the morning session after the gala dinner and there's only a few people in the audience, if your invention is even mentioned briefly in the bottom left corner of one slide, that could stop you from getting a patent. So if you only remember one thing from this talk, remember this. If you think you have an invention worth protecting, you must file a patent application before making it public. You must file a patent application before submitting your journal article, before presenting your results at a conference. Once you have a novel invention, the next requirement is that it must show an inventive step. And to do this, we create a legal fiction, an imaginary person called the skilled person. And we decide whether the invention would have been obvious to this imaginary skilled person. The skilled person has some special powers. It can go anywhere and access any information available to the public before the patent application was filed. It can read any language. But the power the skilled person does not have is the power of invention. The skilled person can follow instructions, do very complicated tasks if prompted to do so, but doesn't think laterally. There's no inventive spark in the skilled person. So how do you show that your invention would not have been obvious to the skilled person? And there are a few ways of this. The most common is if your invention provides an unexpected improvement. You can then argue that it would not have been obvious to the skilled person to try your invention in the expectation of providing that improvement. And there are two things to keep in mind here. First, the word unexpected is important. If your invention improves something, but if that improvement was entirely predictable, then it will be hard to get a patent, because that invention may be deemed to be obvious to the skilled person. But if your invention improves something in a way that was not expected, then you have a good chance of getting a patent. And the second thing is that this unexpected improvement, it doesn't have to be a particularly large improvement. If one property gets slightly better in an unexpected way, that can be enough. Incremental improvements are patentable. You can get patents for groundbreaking inventions and also slight improvements. And let's think of a simple example to illustrate this point. And we'll go back to the invention of the spoked wheel that we've discussed before. And imagine a couple of inventions improving the spoked wheel. And let's suppose that the hypothetical skilled person knows that wheels can have wooden spokes. And they also know that steel beams are stronger than wooden beams. That's what the skilled person has in their mind. And now imagine your invention was to take a wheel with wooden spokes and to make those spokes out of steel. That invention provides an improvement. The wheel with steel spokes is stronger than the wheel with wooden spokes. But that's an expected improvement. The skilled person knows steel is stronger than wood, and so it's obvious that a wheel with steel spokes should be stronger than a wheel with wooden spokes. That invention is unlikely to be patentable. But let's imagine a further invention was to put a steel rim on a wheel, and that this had the effect of lowering friction, improving fuel consumption. If this is an unexpected improvement, this invention is probably not obvious. The skilled person trying to improve fuel consumption would not have thought laterally and wouldn't have thought of placing a steel rim on a wheel. A further requirement for getting a patent is that the invention must be industrially applicable. And this doesn't come up often because this is a very, very low bar. It just requires that the invention can be used in some way. Even if your invention is of no practical use to anyone, as long as someone could use it, it is deemed to be industrially applicable. And in practice, this only comes up really if an invention appears to contravene the laws of science. And a friend of mine works at the UK Patent Office, and he tells me they still get each year a number of patent applications from garden shed inventors who claim to have invented perpetual motion machines. And the way that the Patent Office deals with these quickly is saying that's not industrially applicable because it contravenes the laws of science, so no one could use it. Another requirement to get a patent is the so-called patent bargain. And a patent it's a powerful thing. It allows you to stop anyone from using the invention covered by that patent, normally for 20 years. But in return for that monopoly, the whole point of patents is that the world must be able to use that invention for free when the patent has expired. And that's the bargain. So to meet this bargain, the patent needs to provide plenty of information on the invention. There needs to be enough information there so that the skilled person, the same skilled person that we were discussing with Inventive Step, there needs to be enough information for the skilled person to repeat the invention. But what if you don't want to tell the world about your invention? Well, then don't file a patent application. What you can do instead is keep your invention as a trade secret. If you think no one could reverse engineer your invention, no one else is going to come up with it, by keeping it a secret, you could get more protection than the 20-year patent term. And this sort of thing is normally used in manufacturing processes. So the specifics of what a company might be doing in its factory, they may well keep that as a trade secret. Moving on now to the actual process of getting a patent. And the first thing to say is that it's quite slow. You file a patent application. The patent office examines whether those requirements are met. Is the invention novel, inventive, etc.? You have some arguments with the patent office over that, and you may need to make some limitations. And then you will either be granted a patent or your application will be refused. And that whole process normally takes a few years. It's typical for it to be 5 years after filing a patent application before you actually have a granted patent. But in most cases, that's actually a good thing, that delay. For the reasons we've discussed before, patent applications need to be filed early in the lifetime of an invention, just so you've filed that application before someone else can publish your invention. But this means that applications are not normally filed for products that are completely ready to be sold. There may still be lots of development left to turn that nugget of an invention into something commercial. And that delay between filing a patent application and getting a patent gives time for all of that. And it might be that you find out 2 years later that your invention isn't as good as you thought it was. Maybe there's not actually a market for it. And that delay gives you time to realize this and pull the plug on your patent application before you spent too much money, because the whole process of getting a patent costs money. You need to pay someone like me to represent you. So that's the end of the section on how to get a patent. And what I want you to take home from this is just to keep patents in mind. When you're doing your research, analyzing your results, just remember those requirements of novelty and inventive step. If you are doing something that you think no one has done before, and if you're improving something by doing that, then you probably have invented something that could be patented. So have a chat with your supervisor. Have a chat with the tech transfer team, see what they say. But above all else, be careful what you publish. If you only remember one thing from this talk, it's this. Once you've published an invention, you cannot get a patent. So you need to resist the urge to be a good academic and file a journal article as soon as you can. Think first, could I patent that invention before filing the journal article? So the next part is a quick review of how to read a patent. So patents are written in a very formulaic way. Most patents will be broken down into these sections. There will be a front page with some formal information, who owns the patent, who are the inventors, some official numbers and dates. And the front page should also make it clear if you're reading a patent application or a granted patent. None of that's probably that interesting to you. Things start to get more interesting in the description. This should give some commentary on the background of the invention, a brief review of the literature before the invention. It should set out what the invention is trying to improve and how it does that. And there should then be some worked examples of the invention, a bit like the experimental section of a journal article. And for researchers like yourselves, these examples are likely to be the most useful part of a patent. It's important to note, though, that patents are not peer-reviewed. You can't hold them to the same standards as the journal article. There might not be as many repeats as you would normally see. There might only be 1 or 2 data points with no error. The examples are there to support the patent. So they're likely to be trying to show that the invention provides some improvement. What they're unlikely to do is to spend too much time trying to work out the precise mechanism why there is an improvement. To get a patent, something normally needs to have been improved, but you don't need to explain exactly why it has been improved. After the examples will be the claims. And this is the most important part from a legal perspective. And these are written statements which define the invention. They are called claims because a patent claims protection for anything within the scope of what is written in the claims. And we'll look at this in more detail in the next couple of slides. The claims. At the end of a patent, you will see a series of written statements. And these will contain the technical features which define the invention. And getting these right is very important for 2 reasons. The first one is that the patent requirements, which we've discussed before, are assessed based on the claims. What is written in the claims is what has to be novel and inventive. And the second point is the claims define the protection provided by the patent. And you should think of the claims as an umbrella covering the invention. If anyone does something under that umbrella, they are infringing your patent. So to make that umbrella as big as possible, the claim should list what is essential for making the invention work and nothing else. If the claims include something that is not essential for making the invention work, someone could do your invention without that non-essential thing and avoid your patent. And I'll show you what I mean. If we go back to our example of the spoked wheel, the invention here is the spokes allow for a lighter wheel than a solid wheel. But let's imagine our caveman inventor went to its patent attorney and showed them this specific wheel. And they said, "This is my invention." The patent attorney could have written a claim to protect that specific wheel, which might have been a wheel made of wood with a metal rim having 9 spokes. So there the patent attorney is writing down what they've seen. And you get a patent for that, and the patent attorney thinks they've done a good job. But what if a competitor then makes a wheel with 6 spokes? They will be outside the claim because the claim said a wheel with 9 spokes. So they would not infringe that patent. they would still be repeating the essential concept of the invention, which was merely a wheel with spokes. But because that claim included the non-essential feature of 9 spokes, they could avoid that claim. So a better claim would just have said a wheel having spokes, because the competitor making a wheel with 6 spokes would have infringed that claim. Finally, it's worth mentioning 2 pieces of patent jargon. In the language of patents, the words comprising and consisting have a special meaning. Comprising means including this and including anything else. Consisting means including this and nothing else. So a wheel comprising 9 spokes must have 9 spokes, but it could have 10 spokes or 11 spokes and so on. A wheel consisting of 9 spokes must have only 9 spokes. And the last slide in this section is how to access patents. And patents are all freely available. And this means that there's an exceptionally large resource out there of patent documents, which is probably underused by researchers. And I think it's worth doing some browsing for patents when you're doing your normal literature reviews. There might be some really useful information in the example sections of patents. And a good place to start is Google Patents, which has a very user-friendly search function. And I'll just give you a quick example here of, say you wanted to see if Professor Skinner had ever filed any patent applications. So I found that if I just search in Google Patents for Stephen Skinner Imperial, there's actually a patent application here, which Professor Skinner was named as an inventor for. So you might want to use this if you know an academic in your field has lots of journal articles. You might be interested to see what patents they filed. And there's normally a link which will enable you to download the document itself. And I'm not going to go through this in full detail. It's just to illustrate that you could search for academic names to find more resources. So in this last section, I'll say a few words about my job. First of all, there are many jobs in patent law. I'm a patent attorney, so that's what I'm going to focus on here. If you want more information on the other jobs, IP solicitor, patent examiner, I have some slides in an appendix I can show at the end. So what do I do? Anything to do with inventions. I work with inventors to draft patent applications. I represent clients at the patent office to get those applications granted. I defend my clients' patents if a competitor tries to have them revoked. I get my clients' competitors' patents revoked if they're a problem for my clients. It's all to do with inventions and patents, but there's a great deal of variety. And there's a list here of some skills you need. But what it really boils down to is 2 things, actually. You need to be able to understand an invention, which means you need the technical background of science to understand the way inventors will be talking, to understand the data. And you also need to be able to explain that invention to someone else, both in writing and orally. And I don't think that's very easy, actually. That combination of technical understanding and communication is not easy. And I really think it's a great job. It's very challenging, but in an interesting way, and interesting because of the variety. You'll keep seeing new inventions in new technical areas, dealing with new challenges. It doesn't get boring. And you will see inventions that work. You don't spend days, weeks, months in the lab repeating the same experiments, making small changes, trying to get something to work. Someone's already done that. And that's why they've come to you wanting a patent for it. So you see the very cutting edge of a technical field. And there's also a decent work-life balance. It's a well-paid job, but it's not working for Goldman Sachs. It's not working for a Magic Circle law firm. There are times when you do need to put the hours in, but most of the time there's a decent work-life balance. What's not so good about the job? Exams. And I put this here 3 times because they're really bad. The first 3 to 4 years of starting out in the profession, there are many legal exams that you need to pass to be qualified. Some are easy, but some are really difficult. And by difficult, I mean an exam that takes 5.5 hours that has a pass rate of about 30%. So only 30% of the people taking it pass. There's a few like that. It's worth it in the end, because once you're qualified, the pay goes up quite nicely. But the first few years are interspersed with some pretty bad periods of exams. It's also an office job, but I've put that in brackets because I don't see this as a bad thing. Most well-paid jobs are office jobs. But if you really enjoy being in the lab or doing something with your hands other than typing, then this is not the job for you. Finally, how do you get the job? You have to have a degree in science or engineering. But I'm sure that all of you listening will have that. So that's the first box ticked. A PhD is useful, but it's certainly not essential. I think in my firm, it's maybe 50-50 of people that have PhDs and people that don't. Some firms, like ours, offer open days or internships. And if you can get on these, then that's a good way of getting an insight into what the job's like. These are useful, but they're not essential for getting the job. You don't have to have done an internship to get the job. I'd say they're more useful for giving you an idea of whether or not you actually would want to do the job. most firms should have a recruitment section on their websites. And I've put a link here to our recruitment page, so recruitment.cartmels.com. And larger firms normally have stands at careers fairs as well. I've been to many Imperial careers fairs over the years representing the firm. And there's also this website here, ipcareers.co.uk. And that has lots of useful information and lists a number of firms. So if you're thinking about it, my suggestion would be do some browsing, go to careers fairs and talk to people there. Try to get on an internship, but don't be too worried if you can't, because that's not essential at all. And then go to each firm's recruitment page and apply and go from there. So that's it. Thank you for listening. There's now 13 minutes for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please do let me know.
Fabulous. Thanks very much, Russell. While you were talking, I spotted that there are a couple of questions that have come up in the chat, and someone has their hand up as well. So I'll go to the chat questions first, and then I'll come back to Noman in a second. Okay. So the first question, Russell, is what if another individual or company accidentally recreates your patent without them knowing they've done so?
So I think that's a question about accidentally infringing a patent, if I understand it correctly. So you have a patent granted for your invention and someone else starts doing the invention without knowing about it. In the UK patent statute, there is you can say as a defense, if someone says you're infringing my patent, you can say, but I didn't know about your patent, that's not fair, paraphrasing. However, you can only successfully run that defense if you could not reasonably have been expected to know about that patent. And that's quite a narrow test, because if say you're a company making paint, you would reasonably be expected to keep an eye on what patents there are directed towards paint. So you should actually have your legal team keeping an eye on what patents get granted that might be a problem for what you're doing. So it's actually quite hard to say, I didn't know about that patent, so it's not fair. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it essentially ends up in some sort of legal dispute somewhere along the line, right? Yes.
I mean, it may well be the case that the patent holder may well politely inform you that you appear to be infringing their patent. And if you carried on doing it after that, then damages would be hard to wiggle out of.
Yeah.
But equally, it's worth mentioning it's actually it's an offence to go around accusing people of infringing a patent unless they actually turn out to be infringing your patent. So you can't go around threatening people saying what you're selling infringes my patents unless you're absolutely certain that they are. The point of that being people get scared when they're told they're infringing patents. So we don't want that to be a dodgy business tactic. Great.
The other question, or one of the other questions that's come up is, I think you've probably answered, which is why aren't scientific papers patented more than they currently are? And I guess the aspect there is that you have to have filed before you can publish. So it's
yes, it's far before you publish, and it's also some of it's a historical thing. I think traditionally academics haven't always been as patent savvy as maybe they should have been, and the first thought is I need to get this published in Nature or wherever before filing a patent application. Another reason, though, probably a more practical one, is cost. to get a patent, even just to file an application, you need to pay someone like me to write that application for you, and there are official fees for filing it as well. So it's not cheap, even the first step of filing the application. So if the data you would be putting in a journal article, interesting, maybe something's being improved, but if you think, actually, is there any value in a patent in this, then it may well not make sense to pursue that route.
Yeah. Okay, Noman, you've had your hand up for a while, so if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I was just curious to know that, I wonder if you can't hear me.
I can hear you, yeah.
So if there's 2 firms and they have a skilled person in each firm, and in one firm the patent doesn't, the application doesn't seem to go through, and in the other firm it would, would there be any problem in that case? So
is this the same invention?
So it'd be the same invention sent to 2 firms. What would happen in this case?
That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen very often, if at all, really. So essentially, the one that was filed first would be the most valuable. So the earlier you get it in, the better. And for that reason, it's very rare to have two applications for the same invention. I would say it's even more rare to use 2 different firms for that, partly because the attorneys need to spend some time understanding your invention. So if you, the inventor, do you really want to be doubling your costs for no gain by engaging 2 firms? So the approach taken by everybody is one invention will have one patent application, which will be dealt with by one firm of attorneys. And if you don't think your attorneys are good enough, then next time you've got an invention, you go to someone else.
Great. Okay, so there's a few questions popping up. So the next question is really about the career, I guess, and what the average retention stats for those who start training in patent law and continue on versus those who leave part way.
I don't have the stats to my fingertips, but I would imagine the numbers are pretty high compared to other careers. I mean, at my firm, a few people that started, the people that started at the same time as me, only one of 8 is no longer in the one of 8 is no longer in the profession, I think, and that person may be at another firm. The reason for that is getting qualified is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of exams, and once you've got there, the rewards are good. And to be honest, the thought of retraining as something else, I just couldn't face it. So that's one reason. Another reason for high retention is, as I said, I think it's a great job. It's really interesting. If you're going to do a career change for something else, I think the best thing to do would be to get out early. So there are a few people may find in the first year or so of training, actually, this isn't for me. And you should, if you're not sure, you should get out early would be my advice. But this isn't, say, a field where, say, if you go to work for Goldman or BGC or someone, there's a sort of an expected churn, isn't there? That maybe half of the intake of each year may well not make the grade. That's not the case in this profession, or at least in my firm. Everyone that's employed is employed for a reason, and the hope is they will stay at the firm and get qualified.
Fabulous. Another question more on the legal processes. So if 2 people file a patent for a similar invention, one before the other, but the first person filing, it takes longer to process, and so the second filed patent is granted first, who wins the legal right?
So the short answer is whoever filed it first. So the key, as I said when I was talking about novelty, the key date is when you have filed the application. So whoever filed it first will win. The question, I think the question said similar inventions.
Yeah.
If the inventions are identical, then there can only be one patent, that being the one that was filed first. If they are similar, if they are not identical and different enough such that there's no overlap between the wording of the claims, then both of them can get patents.
Yeah, so I guess the emphasis there is on it's the filing date that's absolutely critical, and how long it takes to process is essentially irrelevant, because your critical thing is you have filed the patent.
Yes, so it's I think almost everywhere that I'm aware of in the world now uses what's called a first to file system, where the first person to file for an invention gets to patent it. It used to be in America up until maybe 10 years ago, up until fairly recently, America still had a first to invent system, where the person that was deemed to have invented it first had the right to get a patent, regardless of who filed the application first. That gets very messy though, because how do you decide when someone actually came up with the invention? So firms would have all sorts of systems in place for getting their lab books authorized and stamped with dates and everything, so they could try to say, no, we invented this on this date. But America changed its law to harmonize with the rest of the world a few years ago now. So first to file is the key thing.
Okay, and back to a careers question, which is, what experience do you think helps strengthen your application when applying to become a patent attorney?
Well, I'll go to the PhD point first. I mean, I applied after doing, well, partway through my PhD, and I felt that did help because you're a bit older, a bit more mature, and you got a few more things you can talk about. You can talk about your research. You've probably given presentations at conferences, and gaining the confidence from that is, I think, helpful for an application. But none of that's essential. If you're a good candidate, then you don't need to have done a PhD. The sorts of things a firm will be looking for when interviewing people are an eye for detail, the ability to understand something quickly and then be able to explain it to someone else. So interview questions, they may well go through some invention with you and see how quickly you can understand it and ask you questions about it. It's difficult to get direct experience because it's a relatively niche profession. When I was applying, there weren't any open days, there weren't any internships available, and we've led the way, Cartmels has, as a firm, in offering these, and so the competition is starting to follow suit. So that is a way of getting experience, is do an internship or an open day. But I'm not sure what else you can do to really get direct experience, because you'll come into the profession knowing absolutely nothing, and you start from the very bottom and work your way up.
And I think that links to a follow-on question, which is, at the beginning of your career, do you start on the legal side or the technical side, and how much time are you given for study?
So it will depend on the firm. At my firm, as soon as you start, you're given real cases, real patent applications right from day one to work on, but that's all done under close supervision of someone like myself, one of the partners or someone. So you hit the ground running. At other firms, I think some other firms do give you kind of test cases, fictitious cases, just to see how you deal with those. But we think it's good just to start with the real stuff. To start off with, you won't know any of the legal things, so you will be called upon for your technical knowledge more than your legal knowledge. So it may well be that a new application comes in and people realize, oh, our new trainee, they did a PhD in a vaguely similar area. Let's give it to them and they can do the technical understanding. To deal with the question of the legal training, firms, well, I can speak for our firm, we offer lots of internal tutorials on the legal aspects, getting up to speed on those. We pay to send you on a course. So about 9 months into your career, you then go to Queen Mary University over in East London and do a 3-month course on some of the legal stuff, and we pay for that. We also pay for workshops and tutoring from specialists for some of the other legal exams. So we give good support, and you're full-time employed and getting paid throughout that. Even so, I found I was spending a Saturday morning every weekend for a year or so through sort of the worst exam period to get that done. Other people would choose to do stuff in the evenings after they finish work. It's up to you really. But when you're an undergraduate student, your full-time job, in my view, is how to pass exams. When you move into the profession, you have a full-time job to do as well. You get support, but you still need to probably do some more studying after hours. So you need to be fully aware that that's what you're getting yourself in for the first few years. But trust me, it's all worth it. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gone 3, Russell. Are you okay to hang on for another couple of questions?
Yeah, I could stick on for another 5-10 minutes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's a question which is a trade secret protected? And I guess that is essentially yes, because the trade doesn't tell anyone and keeps it a secret, right? So it's not disclosed essentially as a trade secret.
It's protected in practical terms by you not telling anybody. And there are also some things you can do to formalize that protection, so it's actually deemed to be a trade secret. So if what you think is a trade secret is written on a post-it stuck in the kitchen above the coffee machine, and anyone walking in and out of the building can see it, if someone leaves the firm and tells someone else about that trade secret, you're unlikely to be able to say to get any damages for that. So firms should be taking steps to identify specifically what their trade secrets are, to limit access to those secrets to only the people that need to know them. Password protection, maybe the tea lady doesn't need to have access to the trade secrets, that sort of thing. So it's a practical thing by not telling anybody, and there are some steps you should do, reasonable steps to protect that secret.
Okay, great. I think we'll finish with one final question. If I don't get to any of the others that are on the chat, I apologise, but we'll go with this last one, which is, does the patent only apply in Europe? Do you need to file multiple applications in multiple areas to secure a global patent and prevent copycats from other countries and areas?
Yes. So I didn't have time to cover this in the body of the talk, but a patent is a national right. So if you need protection in America, you have an American patent. In China, a Chinese patent. In Europe, we have a system where there's a central European patent office. And once that's granted as a patent, it sort of splits up into lots of national patents in England, UK, France, Germany. And fortunately, following Brexit, we're still part of the European Patent Office. There's no Brexit effect there at all. But it's a good, you're bang on with the question. You need a patent in each country you want protection. And there is a system which this very detailed slide sets out, whereby you can file an international application, also known as PCT, which is roughly in the middle. And then a few years later, you can split that application up into different national applications, just to make your life easier from a formal point of view. So, good question. Yes, you need a patent per country.
Yeah. Great. Okay, fantastic. I think, Russell, we'll draw it to a close at that stage. We've not had time to cover all the questions, but I hope everyone found that instructive and useful.